Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. We begin tonight with reaction to a scathing Auditor General's report on Yellowknife's Stanton Territorial Hospital project. The report says the project went hundreds of millions of dollars over budget. Canada's Deputy Auditor General presented the report. He says he's perplexed by the decisions reached by the government of the Northwest Territories. Some NWT MLAs expressed the same sentiment in the Legislative Assembly today.
Perplexed is a good word, because if you were listening to the government at the time, you would have been told everything was fine. Mr. Speaker, I used to call this a billion-dollar hospital, much to the chagrin of the health minister of the day, who insisted it was a cool $600 million. Well, Glenn, turns out I was right. $1.21 billion, 62% over budget.
This is the most expensive capital project in the history of the territory. Our current ministers should not be blamed for the financial mess created by past government, especially Minister of Finance of the day. It was Michael Meltenberger. Mr. Speaker, our people are going to be the ones left paying for the increased cost of this project.
The new Stanton Territorial Hospital in Yellowknife opened in 2019. It was the territory's largest infrastructure project to date. It was built using a public-private partnership, or a P3 model, and it was projected to cost $750 million. Instead, as you heard, the price tag came to $1.2 billion. Another finding in the report is that the GNWT is now paying rent in the old hospital building, a building still owned by the GNWT. Janeway Ellen Armstrong pressed the NWT's infrastructure minister about the decision in the legislature today.
Can the minister explain why the government decided to sublease the old Stanton building at an increased cost of $78.6 million?
The opportunity that arose to sublease the building was later in the procurement process. And this has been some of the challenge with the audit, is that there were multiple stages to what occurred from back in 2013 when the project first originated up to the last stage of that project, which is when that decision was made to sublease. At that point in time, there was this opportunity because the investment that was being made by one of the partners to decommission, renovate, clean up that old building, that involved a significant amount of investment, and their intent was that they would lease that out to recoup the significant cost to do that. When they were ready to do that, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Health and Social Services was also looking at that time for an opportunity to put a long-term care facility somewhere. They did do an analysis on the cost per bed. I'll remind you, Mr. Speaker, that this was after COVID, when costs of building and constructing new things had gone up. The cost per bed was quickly realized would be cheaper at the legacy building than Ligwagoti building than what it would be elsewhere, and so the decision was made to pivot and to utilize that facility.
The Auditor General estimates that the Stanton project will cost $1.21 billion over the next 30 years. Can the minister explain how the territory will pay the increase in costs?
The Auditor General was bringing together what for us is the P3 project, which is the Stanton Hospital, as well as the Ligwagoti building, which is where the long-term care facility and now primary care are housed. So this has been a conversation that I've had with the Auditor General's Office of Canada that does our audits over the course of many years. We do not see, as the Government of Northwest Territories, the two projects as being one P3. That does seem to be how the math was come down here. Again, far be it for me to be the auditor on the floor, Mr. Speaker, but those two projects, from our view, are separate. They're both delivering healthcare services. We will, of course, prioritize to ensure that healthcare services continue to be delivered, and there's a lot of work happening in that space to make sure that we're delivering the right services in the right way at the right cost. And as that evolves in both of those facilities, we'll continue to make sure residents are being served. Thank you.
The Auditor General's report includes several recommendations. The GNWT has accepted all but one of them. An affordable housing complex set for downtown Yellowknife is one step closer to construction. Housing NWT received a development permit last week. The 50-unit complex is set to open in the empty lot between the Raven Pub and Gold Range Bistro by 2026. Half of the units are designed for seniors. Housing NWT says they also expect to see economic benefits from the new development.
We are very excited to see, a piece of infrastructure in the downtown core. It will be close to services for seniors.
The complex was first announced last year during a visit from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The units are for current Housing NWT tenants who have third-party landlords. The corporation says moving people into their buildings will free up availability in the rental market. More reaction tonight about the recent decision from the NWT government to pull out of hosting the 2028 Arctic Winter Games. This time from Yellowknife's mayor. The territorial government announced last week that the Northwest Territories would not be hosting the Games that year as previously planned. The decision was made after officials met with municipalities to find out how eager they are to host. Yellowknife's mayor says her city staff don't have the capacity. They're still catching up on work after last year's wildfires and evacuation. And the Games happen at the peak of Aurora tourist season, a valuable part of the city's economy.
It is a challenge for Yellowknife because our hotels are full already in in March with tourists for Aurora. And ITI actually did a report, and it kind of broke down the economic spend, and the Aurora tourists do spend the most. And so we would actually see a bit of a decrease in the spend with having the sports there. If we could host it during one of our lower hotel occupancy months, then we would see more of an economic boost because, we don't generally have tourists then, and now we would, and they'd be spending money. But it is tricky to compete with the Aurora tourists in March.
Alti says cost was another factor. She says when the city was asked about hosting the Games in 2026, officials estimated it would cost about $5 million. Canada Post presented a new contract offer to the union representing its workers today in an attempt to avert a postal strike. It includes wage increases of 11.5% over 4 years, as well as protections for current employees on pensions, job security, and health benefits. Negotiations have been going on for a year. Last week, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers voted overwhelmingly in favor of a walkout if a new contract couldn't be reached through bargaining. They'll be in a legal strike position on Sunday. A recovery quilt was unveiled today in Whitehorse. Workers and clients from the Addiction Treatment Centre all contributed to the piece. It's the first of its kind for the treatment centre. The quilt was created from individual patches that represent hope, healing, and connection. The CBC's Virginie Ann has the story.
Practical sense of a quilt creating warmth and security, just like a recovery community really creates for that person when you're in it, is the community is able to kind of shield you from some of the harshness that is the challenges of addiction in life.
Behind the warmth and security, there's another metaphor in all that patchwork, one about patience, courage, and solidarity.
It takes tremendous strength and courage to walk this path of healing. We should be able to say that it's okay to be in recovery, and it should be actually a badge of honor that demonstrates that you've gone through something really hard and you're overcoming it. And yeah, I really feel like it's just demonstrates courage.
More than 30 people who fought addiction through the treatment center worked on the quilt. It took a year for it all to come together. For Debbie Clutton, each individual patches tells a story.
This quilt displays the feelings and personal journeys of those that are in treatment. They created their blocks individually using any kind of medium that they wanted, and then we put it together so that they're united in their recovery. Recovery doesn't happen in the 5 weeks that you're here, but it's a start. Just you're working on something together. You need other people for your sobriety. You need support for your sobriety. It's just, like I said, a metaphor for getting people together and getting a start on their recovery.
The quilt will be hanging in the group therapy room as a reminder for all future clients that through this treatment program also comes a community support system. Virginie Ann, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Hope was the message from Nunavut officials as they signed the territory's 4th suicide action plan. Nunavut Aniaktuk means United for Life. It lays out a series of commitments by multiple agencies in the territory. And as Samuel Watt reports, accountability is a cornerstone of this new plan.
A new agreement heralding a new chapter in Nunavut's fight against suicide.
This action plan is our roadmap towards a Nunavut where suicide is no longer normalized.
Multiple agencies have made their pledge in that fight official in writing. Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, the RCMP, Embrace Life Council, and the Government of Nunavut. There are 25 action areas in this new document. Some of the areas in the previous 5-year plan haven't been implemented. But John Main says this time round there will be accountability because it will name who is responsible for each specific project.
It's coming straight from mental health experts, Inuit organizations, youth, elders across Nunavut.
RCMP are often the first port of call in a crisis, so building capacity and cultural awareness are key for Staff Sergeant Major Pauline Mallinson.
When the police first arrive to Nunavut, they have to know Inuit knowledge, so we have agreed we will teach them the culture upon their arrival.
Embrace Life Council has funding in a variety of areas. They include bullying, 2S LGBTQI+ issues, and grief support. Their message to those struggling or know of people struggling:
you might also be under-resourced, ensuring that you're tapping into your network and advising friends on some of the other resources that they can utilize.
In hopes that people who are struggling will hear that they are not alone. Samuel Watt, CBC News, Iqaluit.
If you or someone you know is suffering, there's support if you need it. You can call the Nunavut Kamatsiaktut helpline at 1-800-265-3333 or Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566.
Hi, I'm Michaela. I'm so happy to have these prosthetic legs. I wear them every day so I can do all the things I love to do. I like to hike, skate, and do gymnastics. Because of your donations, WAMPS is able to give me these devices. When you donate, you help kids like me. Thank you.
This is a proposed corridor for multiple pipeline projects.
You're crossing our territory on two ends of your pipeline. Who gave you permission?
Pipelines break of the pipelines would destroy water and everything in it.
They got to come through us first.
Is this an immediate evacuation order for all Coastal GasLink employees? I feel like we are at work. It's just all been building up to this point.
Yenta on the Passionate Eye. Watch free on CBC Gem.
If the car comes with the deal, I'm in.
Cheers, Dragons!
Whoa! I look forward to fighting you on many a deal.
And we look forward to beating you.
Dragon's Den. Watch free on CBC Gem.
The question is, and I'm just going to ask.
I want to ask you, but
why is this such a big deal? What does the science say?
what was their reaction?
What are we talking about here?
Who told you?
So, to be clear, what is the actual story there?
I think we can explain.
A ship described as Canada's largest fishing vessel has been sent back to Turkey after an engine failure. 3 years ago, Baffin Fisheries bought the ship, called the Inukshuk II, for $72.5 million. The new 80-meter-long ship was built in Turkey. 36 hours after the ship set sail for Canada, it was forced to dock in Athens. That was 2 weeks ago. The engine's been fixed, but the ship is back in Turkey for a full checkup.
We didn't expect a breakdown, so things will go wrong, especially with new vessels. Our crew are prepared for such situations.
The ship was headed for St. John's, Newfoundland, then onwards to Iqaluit. But with winter setting in, the ship won't make it to Nunavut until next year. If you've driven along a northern highway, you know it can be disconcerting when you leave cell service. Driving along long stretches of remote and road can be nerve-wracking when you know you can't call for help if you need it. And if something happens, it can be downright scary. Now, at one spot along NWT Highway 5, internet access is readily available, adding much-needed communication in an area which, until now, had none. Carla Ulrich tells us how it works.
All right, so we see the greater shed Wi-Fi, and the password is Highway 5, all together lowercase, and we should be connecting shortly.
This is something you haven't been able to do before. Connect to the internet along NWT Highway 5. This new Wi-Fi hotspot is an initiative by Parks Canada and the NWT government. Fort Smith residents say it will boost safety for drivers on the highway. The Greater Camp is about a third of the way to Hay River from Fort Smith. Password information to connect on the network is located at the site. Jean Morin is with Parks Canada. He says the Greater Camp is the perfect spot for it.
It's even heated inside. If people are stranded, they can get inside and stay warm and get some help. And people can pull into the area here and it's safe. They don't need to stay on the side of the highway. Just make sure that you leave room for all the big plows and trucks coming into this area.
Fort Smith's Lois Burke says having Wi-Fi availability on the highway could save lives, and that with winter approaching, communication is critical on this isolated stretch of highway. Kelly Brown is a veteran trucker who frequently travels the Dempster Highway for work. He says this could be a great idea for highways across the north.
The path that I'm normally on, the Alaska Highway and the North Klondike, they have 911 emergency spots where you can use your cell just for emergency purposes. But we need better communication, you know. Communication's important.
Travelers can use the Wi-Fi services to access the internet at the Greater Camp and place a call if the Wi-Fi calling was previously enabled on their phones. Carla Ulrich, CBC News, Fort Smith.
With the American election just 6 days away, a hot topic between the two candidates continues to be energy, clean energy in particular. Even in Texas, going green is a growing business that some companies don't want to turn back from. Susan Ormiston has that story from Fort Worth.
In an election where Donald Trump is promising to drill, baby, drill, Texas, the beating heart of oil and gas, is surprisingly galloping along with renewable energy, not just building out wind and solar, but storing it in massive battery energy storage facilities like this one near Fort Worth, Texas.
We have just had massive numbers of batteries coming online in Texas. And that level of growth is, I think, projected to continue for at least a few more years.
So these batteries take electricity from the grid when demand is low and store it here. And then when demand spikes, like with heat waves or cold snaps, they can push the stored electricity back into the grid, making it more stable. Some of the energy stored in here comes from gas-powered generation, but some of it is from wind and solar, laying waste to the idea that you can't rely on renewable energy when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing.
Oil and gas and wind aren't one or the other. So, we're continuing to develop the wind projects and we're seeing the demand from the customers for that wind, solar, and energy storage.
The International Energy Agency says battery storage is a key piece of the transition to clean energy, and here in Texas, it's a hot business, but this is Texas. And oil and gas lobbyists are trying to pressure state government to continue to subsidize building out fossil fuel industries and perhaps put up legislative roadblocks to growing businesses like battery storage.
I think overall, they're not against it. That doesn't mean there aren't individual companies or individual interests who are fighting the development of renewable energy.
The U.S. is far ahead of Canada on battery storage, with Texas and California leading the country. It crosses political lines, but with the U.S. election just days away, there is concern there may be a reset on renewable energies if Donald Trump goes back to the White House and takes aim at clean energy policy. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Fort Worth, Texas.
A record-breaking winter clothing drive was held last weekend in Iqaluit. It saw more than 1,000 items donated. It was run by Care for Nunavut, an economic development agency in the territory. The organization says this year saw more people and more donations compared to last year.
The reaction, people was really surprised. They say, "Oh, is it really free? Can I take all I need?" We said, yes, you can just take what you need.
This year, the drive saw around 200 people show up to receive donations, whereas last year it was less than 100. 1,300 items were donated. Quebec has just become the first province to allow qualified individuals to be approved for medical assistance in dying months or years in advance. Some people see this as development, as progress, but others do not. Vanessa Lee explains.
Sandra de Montigny is losing her memory and says she doesn't want to lose her dignity. She was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's 6 years ago at the age of 39. She had already watched as the disease slowly ravaged her father, eventually taking his life.
And it's weird that I decided that if one day I have the same disease, I would want to terminate my life before the symptoms are too strong.
The Quebec mother of three has been fighting for years for the ability to make an advance request for medical assistance in dying.
It's about my physical autonomy and my behavior too.
Until now, Quebec patients had to give consent immediately before receiving the procedure. It's become the first province to allow a person with a serious and incurable illness to be approved for MAID months or years before they lose the capacity to make medical decisions for themselves. Some health professionals are opposed, arguing it's not informed consent.
You don't have the information. You're looking at your situation now, your views now. But when you become incompetent, incapable of making decisions, well, the situation will be different. Your views might be different. You might be happy.
Advance requests for MAID are still illegal under federal law, but Ottawa says it will not challenge Quebec's move. It will launch a countrywide consultation before amending the criminal code. Health Minister Mark Holland knows firsthand it's a sensitive issue. He saw his grandmother deteriorate as her Alzheimer's progressed.
That was deeply painful for our family. And so I think we need time for a conversation about those kinds of issues and how we want to deal with them as a country.
Here in Quebec, advance requests won't be granted automatically. Patients will have to meet with doctors on multiple occasions, with each case assessed on an individual basis. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
It's something that happens to every woman in later life, many of them suffering through it silently. Menopause used to be a taboo subject, rarely talked about openly, and treatment rarely offered. But all that has changed. The CBC's Nisha Patel tells us how.
When it comes to women's wellness, menopause may be the new gold rush. After years of being overlooked, now there's everything from skincare to supplements. A flood of products promising women relief.
I feel like there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of misinformation.
You end up spending a lot for a whole suite of treatments that hoping something will work.
With symptoms like hot flashes, mood swings, and insomnia, perimenopause and menopause affect an estimated 8 million women in Canada over the age of 40.
The global menopause market is worth about $15 billion a year. And it's growing, expected to hit $24 billion a year by the end of the decade.
Women everywhere.
Across social media, too, influencers claim to have a cure.
So the first supplement I started using back at the very beginning was black cohosh root.
Reishi, shiitake, maitake, and lion's mane.
I think it's a marketing storm.
Experts worry about the quality of the research being used to peddle the products.
Anytime a study is done by a company that's going to benefit from the sale, there's bias.
This doctor says when it comes to supplements, many are useless and potentially risky.
I would say pretty much anything you get over the counter to treat hot flashes isn't going to work really well.
She encourages women to talk first to their healthcare provider.
We do have good therapies. Hormone therapy is a good therapy.
But it's clear women like Nadine Schumont are desperate for answers.
At 54, I've tried a lot and nothing lasts.
She's learned firsthand that many remedies don't live up to the hype. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
The scariest part of Halloween might have already landed in the Yukon. Various communities woke up to a blast of early winter weather, including a blanket of snow. About 15 centimeters dumped over Whitehorse on Tuesday night. Many side roads and sidewalks haven't yet been cleared of the heavy snow, leading to slushy and slippery conditions. Local weather specialist David Miller says all this snow stems from low-pressure regions and troughs passing through the territory, originating in the Gulf of Alaska.
A La Nina effect developing in the South Pacific Ocean, and that will generally influence our rest of the weather, particularly in January and February. So that'll control our weather for that part, and we're looking for probably a little bit colder than normal with maybe some more snow.
Snowfall warnings for Whitehorse and surrounding areas have lifted, but they do remain in effect for areas north of Lake Labarge. RCMP are reminding tomorrow's trick-or-treaters to be safe and dress appropriately. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
Which insects are serially monogamous? I'm just curious. Can love help us live longer? I feel alive! Does heartbreak make music better? I love this music. Could AI compose the next masterpiece of our time?
Robot composers conducting robot music.
Do you really need to wait 30 minutes after eating before swimming? And why is something as big as time kept in something as small as a watch?
Whoa, that's heavy.
When you get curious, you get CBC.
They're making more money than they have ever made in the history of the music business.
We have generation after generation of us not seeing a fair piece of the pie.
How do we keep the money from Black music in Black people's hands?
You're going to be introduced to a new world. Stand back.
I think my dislike is warranted.
What was Amy calling it? The beef wars?
You don't tell me anything. You don't share your feelings, open up about your past.
It's not that simple, Amy.